Okay, I would like to begin the session webinar on recent practical experiences and emerging technologies in relation to genetic resources and traditional knowledge. I'm the head of the subcommittee of the genetic resources of AIPPI standing committee of the international intellectual property and traditional knowledge. As the chair of our committee have some technical problems. Dr. Martin Michaos has a problem, so I'll be beginning this seminar. So this is actually the third round of series of webinars provided by our committee, AIPPI, AI, IP, AGR, TCK, TCTK, in collaboration with WIPO. This year we have we are having lots of seminars, and this is the third round. We have already provided 2 rounds of webinars. Those are actually provided by WIPO. One is on traditional knowledge on May 18th, provided by Ms. Daphne Zografis Johnson. She's from WIPO. And the second one was on the topic of introduction to the IP and genetic resources, recent developments at the international level, which was provided by Dr. Shakil Bhatti. He's also from WIPO. So those 2 introductory parts. Now that we know some basic information, so the third one, we are going to have some more practical aspects. So today, we know that in the second seminar webinar, we have learned some basics of genetic resources issues in respect to the intellectual property. So we'd like to continue this wonderful experience. So as we have seen that, utilization of genetic resources and other biological materials have come to assume an increasing important role in modern innovation across the world and field. As a source of information, inspiration of inventions, and genetic resources include a broad and variety of range of subject matter, including microorganisms, plant varieties, animal breeds, genetic resources, genetic sequences, and nucleotide and amino acid sequence information, and trace, molecular evidence, other things. These days, it's genetic editing. So this is sort of a modern genetic age now. So these can be used for particularly treatments, cure diseases, crop imbued with drought resistant traits, and to the range of the advanced COVID-19 these days. Vaccines were also developed based on this genetic resource information. So we have to live on this kind of technologies. So this genetic resources has been playing an important role, and it's increasing. And that is also related to the traditional knowledge. This is also important. Our committee actually focus on both sides: intellectual property in connection with the traditional knowledge, genetic resources, and also cultural expressions. So these kind of materials are interrelated to each other. And today we are focusing on practical issues, matters, aspect of the genetic resources. So I'm also serving as the vice chair of TRIPS Standing Committee of AIPPI. And this is an important, because the TRIPS has an important role in this kind of genetic resources, especially how to prepare a framework of distributing information and benefits sharing. So this time, second webinar on this subject, we are welcoming the two distinguished guests. So we are going to have some more in-depth discussion of the practical issues in working with genetic resources, implementing and complying with the international access and benefit sharing framework with perspectives from the public body stakeholders in Asia and Latin America. So two different areas. Particularly the implementation status of Nagoya Protocol and ABS guidelines in a user country will be introduced, and some examples of incidents in Asian regions will be introduced. And those countries will include some Asian countries, so we are going to listen to it. So I'm also looking forward to receiving such an information. And those are related to the Nagoya Protocol and the Convention on the Biological Diversity, CBD. So those are actually panelists from the practitioners. So the practitioner will have some interesting, exciting stories. So I would like to introduce two speakers. The first speaker, distinguished speaker, is Dr. Tiago Falder from Brazil. He's the president of the Brazilian Association of Bioinnovation. Second speaker, who is Suzuki Mutsuaki, director of the National Institute of Genetics. And I would like to also mention some of the bios from the two speakers. Dr. Tiago has a PhD in genetic and plant breeding, and with over 15 years of experience in biotechnology, he has been dedicated in the last 8 years to industry representation. And since 2019, he is the executive president of Brazilian Bioinnovation Association, which represents the main companies in the advanced bioeconomy in Brazil. He's one of the industry representatives on the Genetic Heritage Management Council, the Brazilian authority on Brazilian ABS legislation. So he will give us a wonderful speech. Dr. Suzuki, he's a director of the Intellectual Property Unit and NIG Innovation at National Institute of Genetics in Japan, which is a member of a research organization, information and system and University Institute in Japan. He has been participating in CBD-related conference for over 10 years and representing Japanese government as a scientific advisor. He was an scientific advisor in the Ministry of Education and other governmental body. So he's also a member of a consulting committee of ABS guidelines in Japan. So he will give us lots of specific issues and some stories about practical matters. Not only Japan as well, but also some those from Asian countries. So the first speaker, Dr. Falda, Tiago Falda, the floor is yours.
Okay. Are you seeing me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Just to know, are you seeing my presentation?
We can see it on the screen. You just need to put it in full screen mode. Perfect.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good night. We are talking with people from all around the world. My name is Tiago Falda, and I'm the president executive of Brazilian Bioinnovation Association. And it's a great pleasure to be here. I thank AIPPI for the invitation to talk about this topic that really fascinates me. Just to contextualize ABBI's involvement in the biodiversity team, I will just dedicate a few seconds of the presentation to introduce to you, just to say some words about the association. ABBI is a private organization in Brazil that represent companies and institutions from different sectors that are investing in the development of innovative technologies based on biological and renewable resource to create new products, process, or business models, contributing then to generate environmental benefits and sustainable economic development. Biodiversity is therefore essential for the various segments that our member companies operate. The history of Brazilian legislation on biodiversity begins right after the signing of the Convention on Biological Diversity in 1992 that took place in Brazil, Rio de Janeiro specifically, and 2 years after the signing of the CDB, Brazil ratified the text of the convention. And in 1995, just 1 year later, the Brazilian parliament started the discussion on the legislation for implement the convention in Brazil. What made the Brazil the first country in the world to start a discussion about biodiversity legislation. Finally, in 2000, 12 years after Rio 92, the legal framework for biodiversity was enforced in Brazil. And it's essential to consider the three objectives of the convention, that is the conservation of biological diversity, sustainable use of its components, and the fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from the utilization of genetic resource. That is more what I would like to talk about to you today. I will briefly describe on this slide how was the legal framework at that time, 20 years ago, and just to contextualize and you understand how we evolve since that time and what the learned lessons that we can bring to you. So let's assume that certain institution or company want to develop a product based on biodiversity. It will start, of course, with the planning, the research, the definition of the species to be assessed. And subsequently, it was necessary to identify the provider of the species. That is very important to say that the provider in that time, in that legislation, could be the state, the Brazil, of course, or it could be a natural person. What I mean is, if the species was found in a farm, for example, the owner of the farm was the provider of biodiversity. I think it's very strange nowadays, but it was the first time that a legislation was implemented in the world. There was no other legislation to compare, and this is like the legislation worked. Once the provider was identified, the negotiation process started in terms of the how benefit sharing was be carried out, and only after the negotiation finished, the company could send the project to the government approval. The government then will, at this part here, sometimes last some years, okay, and any research could be done with biodiversity. Then you have, we had in that time several years sometimes to identify the species, to find the provider, and to negotiate how will be the peak, okay, previous informed consent and the benefit sharing agreement contract. After the government analyzed, it provided the authorization. And here we had another bottlenecks once it lasts at least 1 year. Okay, in the final of the legislation, it was faster, but we have some case that the government lasts 8 years to approve the project. If we're talking about molecular biology, for example, that evolve very fast, it makes absolutely impossible to follow the development of the science. And after authorization in this part, the biodiversity access was possible. The company, the institutions was authorized to access biodiversity, and then the company will start to do their research, their technological development, and until produce the product, and the benefit sharing will be made with the owner of the place, the provider that sign the peak and the benefit sharing agreements. This was our legislation. I can say it's not easy, it's not hard to understand that it didn't work for sure. And here is some lessons learned about this legislation. High bureaucracy, regulation, the bureaucracy first of all, in the entire process of authorization, absolutely discouraged companies and research institutions to access Brazilian biodiversity. Another important problem to be addressed here is there was no regularization procedure. What I mean is, if a company, for example, was irregular, like due to a lack of knowledge about legislation, for example, they don't know that have a legislation, it was not possible to make the regularization. Then it was a very high legal uncertainty. Okay, and the last point that I pointed here is the resistance of the Brazilian government to accept the mutually agreed terms. And then sometimes government, although the legislation established that the parts should freely negotiate the terms of the contract, the government in a lot of time just to interfere, like it is not a good contract, and then this was a very big problem. This list here could be extended a lot, but this 3 point, in my opinion, was the most relevant to show you. And this article published on Science magazine, in my opinion, illustrated in a very well way how was the paradigm shift. Then after a long period and a traumatic scenario with the first biodiversity legislation, our experience allowed us to construct a very different, and in my opinion, I can say that a very stimulating legislation. The legislation was published in 2015. And at that time, in addition to the experience of Brazil, the 15 years experience of Brazilian biodiversity first legislation, the Nagoya Protocol was already in force. And although Brazil has not yet ratified the protocol, we have signed it, but we didn't have ratified. It only happens last year. All the legislation was developed based on the protocol. In my opinion, as I told you, the title of this article at Science illustrating a very well how this new legislation broke a paradigm? How was the paradigm shift with the new legislation in Brazil? But before talking about how the new legislation works, it is very important to keep in mind some basic concepts. And I think Dr. Suzuki will talk to you some points about DSI at his presentation. And it's very important to keep in mind what is the concept, the main concepts of the Brazilian legislation. The first point is the Brazilian legislation bring us a new concept. We are not using anymore the term genetic resources like the convention, like CBD, but instead of this term, the Brazilian government introduced a new term that is genetic heritage. And it is assumed that this heritage is the information on genetic origins of plant, animal, microbial species, or whatever kind of organisms, including the substance derived from the metabolisms of these living beings. What I mean is the use of DNA sequence, digital sequence information have the same value that if you use a sample, a physical sample collected from the forest, for example. And Brazilian government justified it as once we can sequence the genetic material, we can sequence the genetic code of some species. The species will lost value because you can use this information and distribute it freely to all around the world. And then it was important to preserve that information. The second point that is very important to keep in mind is the concept of a finished product. That is the product that does not require any additional productive process. Okay, this is very easy to understand. But the point here is the genetic heritage, I mean, the biodiversity or associated traditional knowledge must to be one of the main elements that add value to the product. This is a very important concept here, and I'd like to ask you to pay attention to this point, because Convention of Biological Diversity establishes that the use of biodiversity could generate benefit sharing. In Brazilian legislation, no. The Brazilian legislation brings us that you can use the biodiversity and in case of biodiversity provide you additional value to the product, then it will be subject of benefit sharing. If you are using biodiversity and the biodiversity can be changed by another product, then you don't need to pay a benefit sharing. Then it's not only the use, but the use of a product that gives value to the product. And it can be understood also that if you use the biodiversity to publicize the product, then it are giving value to the product. Then if you have in the label of the product, like, oh, product from Brazilian biodiversity, then you need to pay the benefit sharing. If you don't put it and the product, the biodiversity raw material do not add any value to the product, then you don't need to pay benefit sharing. It's a very important concept. I think this two concept here is very important. And in this new legislation, Brazil just introduced, make a new confirmation of the Genetic Heritage Management Council, that is the Brazilian authority to deal with Brazilian legislation. It's composed by a government and civil society representatives, 11 ministry representatives, and then as 11 representatives of the ministries that have some 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 subjects that are linked to the biodiversity, like science and technology, environment, like foreign foreign several other ministries. As it was 11, it is 11 ministries, 3 business sectors and agribusiness representatives, and then I am one of these representative here. Academy, universities, research institutes, and 6 representatives from indigenous population, like traditional communities, small farmers. Then we have all these representatives here that discuss how the legislation, Brazilian legislation, need to be implemented here. Okay. Well, following the previous flow chart, I will use the same example to explain how the new Brazilian legislation is not so new now. It have more than 6 years. But how this legislation works. Um, Imagine the same situation. Let's assume again that a certain institution or company want to develop a product based on biodiversity. And unlike the previous legislation, the first Brazilian legislation, the company or institution does not need to request any authorization to the government to start the development of the product. Okay, you have the research planning, you define the species to be assessed, you collect the biological samples, you start the biodiversity access, you produce the product from biodiversity, and the obligation start right here. Okay, the obligation start when the product is ready to go to the market. And these obligations consist of filling out an electronic form where the developer will inform will bring some information about the biodiversity used to produce the product, like the place which was collected, the species, and the most important, the biodiversity gives add value to the product, yes or not. If the product, the biodiversity add product, then it will be necessary to do the benefit sharing. And immediately after filling out the form, the product can be sold, and benefit sharing must be paid at the end of each fiscal year. Okay, then there is no bureaucracy here. There is any bureaucracy. Of course, I'm talking about the general ways. There are some points that need to be improved in the legislation. The electronic form, for example, must be updated. There is some points, some kind of information that is not possible to introduce here. It is time by time being improved, but the way the way that the legislation was constructed allow the development of the new products with biodiversity without any kind of bureaucracy. And once the registration is carried out, the government will analyze it, and there is a timeline to do it, and it is until 60 days. But the government will only inform if there is some wrong information, but the product can still be selling, okay? And then we have the economic exploitation and the benefit sharing. Now, it's important to show that the benefit sharing is not with natural person. The benefit sharing goes through a fund that is dedicated to preserve the biodiversity, okay? And I know my time is ending, and I will finish in few minutes. And the Brazilian legislation consider then two kinds of sectors, okay? Just to understand how does it work, the benefit sharing in seed in different points depending on the sector. You have the agriculture chain that starts with development of variety, the seed, multiplication, selling of the seed, and finally you have the several sectors that raw consumption, food and feed production, and then biodiversity, the legislation in seed, the incidence of benefit sharing in agricultural activities is about the sending of the seeds. Sorry, I put in the wrong place here. And to all of the sectors, the benefit sharing in seeds in the final consumers. Then we can say that the benefit sharing occurs only once and only in one link in the chain. In agricultural activities, the value is in the sale of the seeds, and for other sectors is to the final consumers. And the registration procedure makes each one of the intermediate producers identify who sold the raw material until produce the final one. Just talking about the benefit sharing, it's in the material reproductive for agriculture, other sectors in the final product, like I told you. The modalities is two modalities: monetary, that one goes through the benefit sharing fund, and the non-monetary one is designated to project for conservation or sustainable use of biodiversity. Then the company can dedicate the money to project to maintain the knowledge of practices of indigenous and traditional indigenous populations, or make in public domain the product, okay? And the rates of monetary and non-monetary benefit sharing is like this: 1% of the annual revenue in case of monetary one, and 0.75% of annual revenue from economic exploration when you dedicate to non-monetary benefit sharing. And then just to finish my presentation, we can say that when you assess the genetic heritage, the benefit sharing goes to the fund. When you access the traditional knowledge, the traditional associated knowledge, the providers of the traditional knowledge will receive the fund. And in this point, we have the terms and conditions freely negotiated with the providers. Here is the case that the provider is not the state. When you use knowledge of the indigenous people, small farmers, and local communities, then there is an obligation that the benefit sharing goes to that person, to that people. And when you are talking about the associated traditional knowledge of unidentified source, then it goes to fund again. Unidentified source It means like it's a popular knowledge that nobody knows who have. Then this is what this is the point. I was planning to dedicate the last slide to talking about the Nagoya Protocol in Brazil, but I will just told you briefly to finish my presentation. I know my time is over. Brazil participated in the discussion about Nagoya Protocol, was the first country to sign Nagoya Protocol, but the ratification last 8 years. It was in discussion in Brazilian parliament. There was some political issues involved, and finally last year, the Nagoya Protocol was ratified, and we will participate in the first COP of CBD this year with part of the protocol. Then we didn't implement the protocol. The protocol was signed last year, the second semester last year, and it just into force in Brazil some weeks ago. There is a planning of how to implement it, but it is not implemented yet. But is it? I'm sorry to extend my time. Hope you appreciate my talk, and I'm at your disposal to explain and discuss more about Brazilian legislation and some impacts of Nagoya Protocol to the world, or whatever kind of discussion you want to have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tiago Falda. So we have limited time, so I would like to follow up on to the next speaker, Dr. Suzuki Muzaki from Japan. Dr. Suzuki, the floor is yours.
Okay, can you hear me and slides? Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's all good.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for Takeshi and Tiago. It is pleasure for me to join. And today I have introduced briefly the Nagoya Protocol and its implementation in Japan and other Asian countries. Yeah, I would be very happy if my presentation could be useful to AIPPI activity and to the audience. And I would like to begin by begin by outlining my presentation. First of all, I will show you the biodiversity in Japan, and secondly, I will show the Nagoya Protocol and also our ABS guideline. And then I will explain about the Asian countries implementation. And then I will introduce the accidental cases. And also I will explain about the DSI data sequence information. It's very, description DSI in CBD. Okay, I'll start. Japan is rich in biodiversity, have unique biota. Because narrow shape extend from north to south for 3,000 kilometers. Policy for conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity have been implemented for decades. And the most notable feature of Japan's biota is the high rate of endemic species because of the Japan's history of repeated the isolation and integration with Eurasia continent. We can observe the many species are unique to Japan. Okay. Iriomote wild cat and Hakusan ichige and Japanese tree frog. Okay, let's move to the explanation of the Nagoya Protocol. The Convention on Biodiversity was adopted in 1992. Yeah, the number of party is 196, and EU is included as a region, and all, however, United States is non-party. The three objects is the conservation of biological diversity and sustainable use of the component of the biodiversity. Third object is related to the ABS. Third object is the fair and equitable sharing of the benefit arising out of the utilization of genetic resources. Yeah. And also after the Bonn guideline, Nagoya Protocol was adopted at COP10 in October 2010. This is a picture of the timing of the hitting of the gavel by the president. It's 10 years ago. I was there. And after adoption of the Nagoya Protocol, we discuss about the domestic measure about the Nagoya Protocol. And finally, 2017, we finalized of the domestic measure and ratification. And from 2017, May 22, May 22 is Biodiversity Day, International Biodiversity Day. And Japan has ratified the May 22, 2017. Now, today, more than half of the countries that's a party to the CBD are member or 113 countries. In many countries, law and regulation are being developed. However, the process and ABS procedure, it's on the way of the development. And this is the scheme of the Nagoya CBD and Nagoya Protocol. User have to get the PIC. PIC means the prior informed consent, and also user have to establish with provider of the MAT. MAT means the mutually agreed terms. It's a contract. And after getting PIC and also establishing the MAT, user can transfer to own country and under the Nagoya Protocol, ABS clearinghouse has started, and ABS clearinghouse issued the International Recognizing Compliance Certificate, IRCC, and also Japan government will monitor the IRCC obtainer by checkpoint. Okay, I'll show you our ABS guideline. In response to the Nagoya Protocol, there's two positions as the user country and also provider country. Japan has mainly taken a position of a user country. As a user country, we set the checking lawful access and utilization of genetic resources, and also we set the measure to address non-compliance, and also we set the supplementary measure to support lawful access to genetic resources. And also Japan government designated us as a ABS help desk in academic field. And as a providing country, we decided the user does not, the government of Japan does not require the PIC for access to genetic resources in Japan. And also we have created the systems that allow the access of genetic resources to report to lawful access to the government. The information will be made available on the MOE web page and ABS Clearinghouse. Okay, this is a short summary. Japan is rich in biodiversity, and also 2017, Japan finalized, and also our ABS guideline emphasis as a simple and clear system as a user country. Okay, let's move to the Asian country, the status. Many countries have established their own law and regulations in line with Nagoya Protocol. They are also creating law and regulation on genetic resources and related traditional knowledge. And if I had more time, sorry, I would like to talk about the result of each analysis, but for today, I will only introduce the case of Malaysia. Malaysia ratified the Nagoya Protocol at 2019, and the statute itself is Act 795, which was prepared in 2017. This is divided into what is implemented at the federation level and what it to be implemented at the state level. And it will also monitoring and detection was performed by the Malaysia IPO. This is a flow diagram. The characteristic of genetic resource and traditional knowledge for characteristic as a flow is different for the non-commercial use and commercial use. Non-commercial use is easier. And also, I'll explain about the Sabah, state of Sabah, Malaysia. In Malaysia, Sabah and Sarawak state had an ABS system earlier. Because the Sabah and Sarawak state is a semi-independent state. This is a part of the Sabah's chronology, and Sabah Biodiversity Center is a main player in Sabah state in the field of the ABS, and they have online application systems. And also law, the state law prohibits the access and export of the genetic resources without state permit. Sabah Biodiversity Center runs the online application system. Unfortunately, problems are common. Here are two examples of the trouble. One is the retraction of the paper related to Sabah, which I mentioned earlier. The other is an incident caused by the Japanese university employee. In 2020, a Korean researcher who used the research material from Sabah, Malaysia, had to retract his paper at the request of Sabah. The researcher had never visited Sabah. However, the museum where he obtained the sample was illegal. The retraction of paper is great tragedy for researcher. However, he or she needed to make sure that the research sample he or she did not go through a legally problematic process. Legally problematic process. And I would like to introduce the example of the Japanese university employee. Yes, sorry, please forgive me. This example is not in Ecuador. A Japanese university employee was arrested at Quito airport for illegally collecting insects in Ecuador while on vacation. He was arrested at the Quito airport. In Ecuador, genetic resources are considered to be the property of the country at the level of the constitution. As a result of the court, it was confirmed by his mother's letter that he was a good son, and he had no criminal record in Japan by embassy, and public apology was issued in newspaper, and regular visit and were made at the Ecuadorian embassy in Japan. Yeah, from this incident, I want emphasis of the awareness rising is important. Yeah. Okay. I will, sorry. Yeah, let's move to the DSI issues. DSI, DSI debate itself has been around for a long time, but the real discussion started at COP14 in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, 2018. At COP14, it was decided that DSI task is to establish the scientific and policy process to resolve difference. In accordance with this decision, country and also research report and submission from the stakeholder. Since COP14 in 2018, reports have been prepared and opinion from country have been collected, and expert committee have been held. Also, due to the corona disaster, the conference was postponed for a year. However, public webinar has been held online every week to discuss this DSI issues. Yeah, there in incoming August, pre-conference of COP will be held. Pre-conference, so-called the OEWG, open-ended working group, third. And in COP15 in Kunming, China, will be held October in this year. Some kind of decision will be made at COP15. And okay, DSI, data seeking information. What is a DSI? Actually, currently, the fundamental problem has not been solved. Although DSI has been discussed and sorted out by the expert committee, the exact definition and scope of DSI has not been determined. It is difficult to discuss because the scope varies from person to person. I think of it as a group 1 DNA and RNA sequence is appropriate as for the DSI. It was created by the CBD Secretariat based on several policy options that have all been reported. Currently, there is an international debate on what exactly is appropriate ABS system for DSI. I personally think about that it would be better to keep the basic free access and open access and add new system, for example, the technical and scientific cooperation. I would like to ask for the help of the AIPPI and IP expert to discuss the creation of such a system. I need your help. And okay. Oh, it's a time. And finally, I would like to briefly introduce ourselves. We belong to the National Institute of Genetics. National Institute of Genetics is a research inter-university research institute corporation. NIG belongs to the Research Organization of Information and Systems. We established at Mishima in 1949, 17 years ago. And this is, I am a founder of ABS support team for academia. We are our activity. We are working to educate and support and awareness rising to researcher and university staff. Also, we are support for the access to genetic resources. And we doing the international activity related to the overseas genetic resources. Actually, as Takeshi introduced me for 10 years. I have been a Japanese delegate in COP from COP 10 to maybe COP 15. Yeah, I would like to. Yeah, I need IP specialist help to discuss what is appropriate ABS system, and also, yeah, I want to emphasize of the importance of the open access and ABS. Yeah, thank you very much for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Suzuki, about the wonderful seminar and comprehensive and some practical matters, introducing some of the issues. So I would like to go to the Q&A session. The time is actually extended, but I would like to continue this session, maybe 5 to 10 minutes. So Michelle, can you? Okay. So I'd like to start with the follow up or the feedback of the previous session. As I mentioned earlier, the present seminar is the number 3 of the webinar of the series, and the second one was the same topics and several questions raised. So WIPO, Dr. Bhatti has kindly provided the answers to these questions, some of the questions. So the first question that about the something of the tangible and intangible products like sequence information and actual material. The answer will be actually given in the format of a seminar. So please access to this address and take a look at this seminar. And second one is the question about how many countries do they have genetic resource database. This is also included in the WIPO website as a database. So please access to this URL's address. So please take a look. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah, thank you. So there's more questions about number 3. Could you give us the examples of a misapproach case? And this is also some report and studies on this topic. And then WIPO provided some publications, which is found on this link. And then number 4 is how the WIPO, which is system is appropriate for DSI and ABI. This is also a topic mentioned in the TKD brief number 10, which is also found in this link. So please visit these links provided by WIPO. WIPO has provided a number of sources, informations, so those will be helpful to our audience. And also WIPO give us some alert training courses, which is also found in this link. So if some of those who are interested in taking this seminar, please visit. At the same time, we are welcoming Q&A questions from the floor, but it looks like some of the questions. But I'll go to some questions. So I would like to go to have a question about maybe maybe both of you, Dr. Falda and Dr. Suzuki. There are some discussion about DSI, and Tiago just introduced us Brazil decided to use the term genetic heritage, which may be involved in information. So maybe first one is question is to Dr. Pauda. Does this mean include both of the DSI and material, or does this genetic heritage could mean something else, something different?
Okay, it's a very good question. It means that for the Brazilian legislation, the access of biodiversity physical sample, for example, or when you access the digital sequence information, both physical samples and the digital sequence are considered genetic heritage. Therefore, both have the same treatment. Both can generate benefit sharing, of course, if add some value to the product. If the protein generated from a gene sequence, when introduced in some organisms, if that protein is responsible for the function of the product, then it will have benefit sharing. It's the same if you can use the physical sample, and you can use the digital sequence information to produce the product, a code by that sequence, and both are considered genetic heritage, or in the CBD language, it's genetic resource.
I see.
It's a very controversial discussion at CBD. I was there when it started in Mexico, and then in Egypt too. It's very difficult to deal with at CBD level.
I see. So this means heritage could mean everything that may be related. In other words.
Yes, it's not everything, because it's the part
there's some boundaries.
Yes, if you need to give value. It's not only the use of biodiversity. I think it's a very special point in Brazilian legislation. In the first legislation in CBD is also there. If you use the biodiversity, whatever they use. You use just to increase some amount of the raw material. For example, there is no you can substitute, you can change for other raw material. If you use biodiversity, you need to pay benefit sharing. In Brazil, no. If the biodiversity add value to the product, is responsible for the function of the product, then you need to pay the benefit sharing. It's a very special point of the legislation.
Thank you very much. Dr. Suzuki, so genetic heritage is not really familiar with your experience probably, but in Japan, or maybe other Asian countries, what are their position? Or you know, the DSI is still under discussion. To my understanding.
Depend on the each countries. Of course, Japan genetic resources by Japan government is only tangible materials. Yeah, so that the DSI is out of scope in Japan. In Japan, however, Malaysia and other country, yeah, their definition of genetic resources include this information.
I see. So it's also different from Brazilian position, because of Brazil, take the, introduce some other terminology. So it's
yeah,
in that sense.
Yeah, they made another. However, I wonder the track and tracing of DSI. Track and tracing is a difficult. I think it is difficult to the track and tracing of the information. Yeah.
Do you have any solution to that, Dr. Falgo? Or still under discussion?
Sorry, Dr. Takeze, I can't get your point.
No. Dr. Suzuki has pointed out the track and tracing may be difficult when the simply intangible information is an issue.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, it's very hard in Brazil. Although we have the information under in the legislation, the scope, there is no rule on how it should be used. It's under discussion. Okay. There is thousands of sequence in genetic database, and in my opinion, if we do not have a very specific way on how to use it and the cases on how to use it, it will be impossible. Okay. For example, how you will regulate the access to sequence that was introduced in the database before the Nagoya Protocol, for example, or before the discussion about DSI. This sequence not be included for sure. How you will deal with sequence that are conservated. I mean, for conservated in biology, in molecular biology is I can say that occurs in several kinds of organisms. You can have the same sequence in a human being, in a plant, in a bird. There are several kinds of sequence that are present in several organisms. Then how to deal with this kind of situation, as you can change the organisms to have the same sequence. Then there are a lot of points that must be discussed and correctly addressed. I will not say if I'm in favor or not in favor. I'm just telling you how the Brazilian legislation works. It is controversial also here in Brazil. There are some people that think that should not be included. Okay.
Okay. Can I ask you from a question from the audience to the Brazilian law?
Okay.
So I just read. when the genetic information of a species is used to generate an antibody, and the product is the antibody itself, this is considered as accessing the genetic heritage, and does it require benefit sharing?
Oh, this is a very good question. And I will say that we had discussed it here some years ago in the council, how to deal with the human genetic heritage. Human genetic heritage is not included in the legislation, okay? Human genetic heritage is not included. The question is, when you use, for example, a sample of a virus, for example, like coronavirus or a bacteria, and you isolate it from a human being, it should be included in the legislation. There is no answer, okay? This point should be regulated yet, but human beings are not in genetic resource. It is absolutely out of the legislation.
Okay, it's a clear answer, at least for the human.
Yes, for sure.
Okay, thank you very much. So, you know, there are much discussion until the actual COP15 to be held in October. But I'm not sure any. I would like to have some compromise, but this is also related to some political issues. So, but AIPPI should be neutral. So I will keep neutral as much as possible. This is going to be the last question, or maybe proposal, because as Dr. Suzuki mentioned, Japan has created, genetic information database together with the European Union and the United States for a long time, maybe more than 20 years, as an INSTC. So I think this kind of database should be helpful in collaborating each other internationally. Either DSI is considered to be material or not, but at least this is going to be some discussion point. I'm not sure, because I'm simply a practitioner. So do you have any collaboration between Brazil and this database, trilateral database?
Yeah, I myself would be very happy if the more people around the world would use the INSDC, and I believe that the more researchers around the world use the INSDC database, and the more people, so the more people will realize that they should use it more smoothly with current system. And with this in mind, we have been conducting the bioinformatics workshop to the providing country. Last year, we had a bioinformatics workshops by online with Indonesian researchers, and this year we are doing the research in the Vietnam, and also I think the capacity building is very important. To solve these issues, and also of course if Brazilian researcher need our help, we will help, and we can exchange the opinion each other, and also we will provide the education system of the bioinformatics. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you have any comments on that, Dr. Falda? Okay.
Oh, sorry. The connecting for me, the internet is.
Okay. Do you have any comments?
No.
Okay.
Thank you. I couldn't hear Mr. Suzuki talking now. It's instability of the internet. Yeah.
Anyway, Dr. Suzuki is welcoming you, Brazilian people, to
Oh,
to have some collaboration with this kind of a genetic information database. And then
very
we're
nice.
happy to provide you some educational program if you need it. So
Oh,
please make some international collaboration
for
to
sure.
solve the issues.
Let's keep in touch.
Yeah. So the time is up. Well, maybe extended for than I expected, but I would like to close this third webinar. So thank you for your listening to wonderful, exciting sessions, and thank you to distinguished two speakers giving us a status quo and some specific examples of the genetic resource IP matters. Actually, AIPPI, our committee is not only our committee, but also, I'm also the vice chair of the TRIPS committee, and AIPPI committees are very active in providing a lot of webinars. At least we are providing at least 3 webinars next week, this week, this week and next week, and the coming month. So I would like to forward my microphone to our chair of the IPPI Traditional Knowledge TC and Genetic Resources, Mr. Martin Michels, to in order for him to introduce the next webinar, which will be the last one. Dr. Martin, please.
Thank you, Takeshi. And for I apologize for not being able to attend the beginning. I had some technical issues that give me no access. But I'm really very happy to have this webinar to listen to the presentation of Dr. Tiago and Suzuki Mitsuaki. This is just like a beginning of a new stage of discussion of these topics. Of course, Mr. Suzuki, we will have taken these issues of DCI, and we maybe should include in our agenda in the committee. Of course, it's a very interesting aspect. So I want to also thanks very especially to Professor Takeshi Komatani. Takeshi is he said the vice chair of GRTK subcommittee, but he's very active and very concerned about these topics. Despite he said he's a practitioner, he's also a visiting professor at Graduate School of Science, Technology, and Innovation of Nagoya University. So we have a very interesting scientific meeting today with these 3 distinguished experts. But before I close, I want also to thanks to Ralph Knack, the second Deputy Rapporteur General of IPPI, but also to Ana Claudia Mamet Carneiro, because of her, Dr. Falda was here, and I really appreciate her assistance and his participation. But also, I always will be very grateful with Michelle Scherer and Cinzia Petruccello, because they make things happen. And this is a very good beginning. I'm very happy with this series of webinar. On July 29, we will have the next one, and it's very interesting because it's in relation with good traditional cultural expressions. We will discuss about this issue of cultural appropriation. Is this appropriation? Is this an appreciation? How about the IP perspective? We have 3 or 4 speakers that we will have a very vivid discuss. Head the webinar by Karen Abraham, the vice chair of the TCE. So I invite everyone to attend us. And also we can start to distribute our questionnaire about these issues. And we hope to see you in the IP Cafe in the Congress of IPPI this October. Thanks all, thanks for your patience, your attention, but mostly for your interest on these topics. Thank all, thank you. Bye.
Thank you.